here's a man who had a golf tournament won and mentally and strategically played a hole so badly that it cost him the golf tournament.
In the ancient game, he was set to win the oldest prize. Approaching the 487-yard par 4 18th at Carnoustie, Jean van de Velde, a 33-year-old journeyman with one win in a decade on the European Tour, held a 3-shot lead.
Now what to do? What to do? He's out with a driver now. Now, I'm not sure this is right. To have the audacity, the stupidity to take a driver out of bounds on the left, little stream, little berry burn running down the right fairway, 40-odd yards wide or whatever, 3 shots ahead, the championship in the grasp of your hand, 1 hole to go, 3 iron, 7 iron, pitch up, and it's all over. Thank you very much.
There's no way you hit driver in your hand. If you're his caddy, you break every club but the wedge and the putter.
Taking a couple of bounces around the burn.
Is this real, Mike? Are we actually seeing this?
The ball hit the top of a grandstand railing, bounced off the stone wall guarding the burn, and came to rest in knee-high rough.
You could see from Van de Velde's face as he looks down that he's got an issue, that lie is really bad. The sound of that club hitting the rough, the ball goes up, and it's almost like it stays in the air long enough to rub it in. It's like if the ball was a person, it would have stopped and waved at Van de Velde, go, ha, ha, as it goes in.
This is so sad. And so unnecessary.
Then, the sideshow began.
He's surely not going to go and climb down in there and try to whack it out of there. No, that would be totally ridiculous. No, what are you doing? What on earth are you doing? No, Jean, please, would somebody kindly go and stop him? Give him a large brandy and mop him down. Then when he started taking his shoes and socks off and going into the water, I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it before, and to attempt to hit the ball out of there is pure madness. Then he stands with his hands on his hips in true sort of Gallic style, like, Inspector Clouseau. And I honestly did not know what to say, which isn't like me at all. But what do you say when you see somebody destroying in front of your very eyes? He's destroying the chance of a lifetime. When you sit and you think about it, what could have been, what might have been, it's very difficult to get over that. And I think the scars are still there. If you scratch away at the surface, the scars are still there. They must be there.
Hello everybody, welcome to episode 46 of Life and Life Only. And this is the last part of my talk with Darryl Swan about life coaching and the inner game. The clip you just heard there was an incredible event that happened in 1999. It was a British Open Golf, and Jean van der Velde, over 71 holes of a 72-hole tournament, he got himself into a position where he had a 3-stroke lead, and he only needed to hit a 6 on the par 4 18th. And that was just a little compilation of an item that was done a few years later talking about it, and I'll put the video in the show notes. The way it relates to this part of the conversation is that we talk about nerves, and this was quite spectacular, and it did get quite comical, as you'll see. If you've never seen this or you've never heard of it, the video will show you. There was some sort of tragicomedy element to it, but it's really, you're really seeing a person breaking down in the context of high pressure sport and, I'd say temporarily losing their mind. And we do talk about that in the conversation, the psychology of it. Just before we go to that, I want to just read you a little bit from the Healthline website. And it's talking about nervousness. It says, nervousness is a common feeling brought on by your body's stress response. This involves a series of hormonal and physiological responses that help prepare you to handle a perceived or imagined threat. The body prepares to fight or flee a threat by boosting adrenaline production. Almost instantly, the heart begins to beat faster, your blood pressure rises, and your breathing quickens, increasing your alertness and energy. And we do talk about the fine line there between a little bit of that being good, but then when it starts to overload, it can spell disaster. This response can result in feelings of nervousness and anxiety. Then it talks about how nervousness is different from an anxiety disorder. Nervousness is a natural response to a stressful event. It's temporary and resolves once the stress has passed. It can be controlled even if you're someone who is more prone to nervous feelings. Now, of course, high-level sports event is not the best environment to try and control it. Obviously, some have better command of their feelings and their responses to the stressful situation than others. But I think it is quite comforting to know that nervousness is a common thing and a natural thing, really, in humans. Anxiety disorders, and we have talked about anxiety in this series, are psychiatric disorders that develop from a number of complex factors, including genetics, brain chemistry, and life events. Anxiety disorders are long-lasting and uncontrollable without treatment. So that's really talking about severe anxiety. And in part one, I talked about maybe the difference between life coaching and therapy, and how if you had severe anxiety, you would need to be referred to a therapist. Let's stick with nervousness for a second. So on this website, they talk about what you can do to overcome nervousness. In an uncomfortable situation, remind yourself that nervousness is normal and it can even be helpful. Most of us feel this way when presented with new challenges and opportunities. Ultimately, these experiences help us grow. Nervousness is your body's way of preparing you for what's coming, which is usually something that's outside your comfort zone. Letting go of your fear and accepting that it's a completely natural experience can help keep your nerves in check. And there's various things. Now, this is a very brief article, so this is quite superficial advice, let's say. You know, it's not going deep into the psychology of it. It's more of a practical thing. So it says, be prepared. You can't always predict or plan for everything that life throws your way. However, there are some work or social situations that you can prepare for in advance. For example, practicing for a scheduled work presentation, having a friend or loved one accompany you to an event or appointment, and allowing extra time to get ready for work, dates, or other social events. I think I did talk at the beginning of the conversation I had with Daryl about how in my teaching I prepare more than I need. So that's a practical aspect. So if you've got the practical aspects sorted out, then the psychological aspect, although it's not necessarily under your control completely, it will help. And it says get into a positive headspace. This is a little bit superficial, just to say I'll be positive. You know, yes, positive self-talk, envision your desired outcome, and then even things like putting on an uplifting song. Talk with someone, share your feelings with others, and then try a relaxation technique. And this is where the meditation aspect might come in. So it says about deep breathing. It works quickly and can be practiced at any time and any place you feel nervous. And that is the magic of deep breathing. You know, you can spend 30 seconds or a minute, and you can, in some cases, quite profoundly change the way you feel. It's not long lasting in itself, just 10 deep breaths, but it can really make a difference in the moment. There's different types of breathing exercises. These include the 4-7-8 breathing technique. So you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 7, and breathe out for 8. Or what's called diaphragmatic breathing, which is breathing through the diaphragm. With this one, put a hand on your chest and a hand on your stomach. Without straining or pushing, breathe in through your nose until you can't take in any more air. Feel the air moving through your nostrils into your abdomen, expanding your stomach and sides of the waist. Your chest remains relatively still. Purse your lips as if sipping through a straw. Exhale slowly through your lips for 4 seconds and feel your stomach gently contracting. And then obviously you repeat. I would say 5 to 10 deep breaths is perhaps optimal. Of course, you could carry on after that, but I think that will do the job for you temporarily to get you through whatever stressful situation that you're dealing with in the moment. Yes, deep breathing is one of those things, rather like the cold showers that seasoned listeners of Life and Life Only will know that I engage in, if that's a word, to get me through when I wake up feeling tired. Don't have hangovers anymore, folks, because I very rarely drink, and if I do, I normally have a couple, and that's enough for me. But it's one of those things that it's just there, it's free, you can access it anytime. After we talk about nerves, we also have some fun speculation about the ATP and WTA, that's men's and women's tennis tours, and some Grand Slam speculation for the rest of this year and beyond. Just want to say, having edited these 3 parts, I'm very proud of Daryl's debut here, and I do say that to him on the show. He did very well, and he always had a lot to say, and the conversation flowed well and was very easy to edit, which is always nice for a podcaster. And also how open he is to talking about the things that he has learned and still has to learn, because people in general, and I include myself, we like to believe that we've got it all sorted and we know the score. And it's nice to hear someone say, this is what I'm working on, this is what I have been working on, and this is what I need to work on. Very nice. If you'd like to help out the show, there are links in the show notes to PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. Thanks to the people that have donated recently. I haven't decided on the next show. I've got a few ideas going around the old brain box, so we'll see which one rises to the surface. But for now, let's cut to myself and Daryl about 3 weeks ago, finishing off our rather epic conversation. This is the shortest of the 3 parts of the conversation, but overall it was pretty epic. So hope you enjoy that, and I'll see you soon for the next installment of Life and Life Only.
Now we're going to move on to a very, very interesting topic for discussion, which is the phenomenon of nerves, namely feeling nervous and how it affects people's performance. So we have been touching on this already, but I wanted to just share a bit of research that I found was interesting. Now, I find more and more, if you want to understand even modern human nature, if you go back to what we know about our tribal days, which is most of our existence, the modern world is such a tiny, minuscule proportion of our total existence, you'll find that a lot of the behaviours that people find very, very difficult to shake are ones that kept them alive in tribal days. I won't go into them all now, but I did discover that one of the theories, let's call it at least, about why people get nervous when they're giving a presentation, for example, is that in the tribal days, if you were in front of a group of strangers, it probably meant that they were people from another tribe, and there was a fair chance they were going to try and kill you. So kind of makes sense, it's a theory. I don't know if it's possible to prove that. But yeah, that's just one example of how we have these hardwired things. And of course, some people, I was saying earlier, I'm more of a quiet show-off. So I actually enjoy having people watching me playing music or whatever it is. But how are you with nerves? How do you feel when you get in pressure situations? Can you describe it, or are you good? Have you trained yourself, or what would you say?
Yeah, no, I'm certainly not immune to those feelings. Maybe people are trying to kill me in my subconscious.
There you go.
No, but your breath gets quick, your heart beats faster. You can feel it in your chest sometimes, right? I've done a lot of decent amount, I guess, of public speaking, and my job, relies on, it's a bit of a sales role. So, I have speaking to strangers is a big part of my day. I am an extrovert, so, that is easier for me. I don't find it debilitating or scary, but you still get, or I still get, those feelings of nervousness, trepidation leading up to, say, those public speaking type events. Or even, social situations in general. It's not completely natural to me, even though I enjoy it and I do get energized by it. It does take a bit of a push, I guess. So yeah, I know the feeling, or, it happens every once in a while in a tennis match too, which I'm trying to train myself to enjoy that feeling and, start recognizing it for what it is so that you're able to perform. Not ignore it, but move past it or use it as a positive, right? That's what I heard the Tiger Woods of the world, or the people, Michael Jordans of the world, who really thrive under those conditions. They use it as fuel, not as fire.
Yeah, and of course, there's such a fine line, because a lot of the chemical stuff that's happening in your body when you're in those situations, there's a fine line between excitement, nervousness, and fear. So a lot of people talk about, imagine if you're in the forest and you see a bear in the distance. And I'm not talking about right in front of you, where you'd be basically toast. But if you saw a bear like at 200 meters or something, and you think you've got a chance of escape, but obviously there's fear there, but, you would be completely in the moment, as we were talking about being in the moment with meditation. Sometimes in certain situations, like I remember being in a car, like when I first got my license, I was a bit of a lunatic, to be honest, in the car. And I came close to having an accident. And just in those 2 or 3 seconds when I slammed the brakes on, you're in the moment. It's maybe not a nice situation, of course, but yeah, it's interesting. So
that's a good reframe of it, though, and I appreciate that. I want to call it out again, actually, that the nerves are, by definition, right, living in the moment. There's no excuse. Even gearing up to do a public speaking engagement or whatever the case is, right, business meeting where you're put on the spot and you feel these nerves. You're right. You're anxious. I think you said that on the previous session we had. Anxiety is about the future or the past, but in that moment there's anxiety. There's no doubt about the future, but you are here and now. That's profound to me, actually.
That's it, yeah. And like I say, with the chemicals, it's not as if there's a load of anxious chemicals here and some excitement chemicals here and some nerves chemicals here. It's a melange of all of them, and often you get a mixture of the two. And as I told you earlier, I've always had quite a fascination with boxing. Like, I did a tiny bit. It wasn't fights, it was just training and a bit of sparring and stuff. And boxers will tell you that, when you're going out to fight for, the heavyweight title or whatever, you're going to be afraid. And even Mike Tyson said he was afraid. So, I'd take it from him. But you are just completely in the moment. And boxing, of course, works in split seconds, rather like tennis, really, at the highest level, once the rally starts. Of course, the difference with tennis, another unique thing about tennis is that you get time between the points. And, of course, you get to sit down every 2 games, and that may or may not be a good thing, because maybe you got a minute to sit down and think too much about what's happening. But it's interesting. I think there's a lot of literature now in the self-development about how fear is a good thing. But as I was saying earlier, if you have low-level stress, like running for a bus or something, that's quite good for you. But as soon as the stress reaches a certain level, obviously it's not good for you at all. And I think it's the same thing with nerves, because nerves will create adrenaline, which will create extra energy, even if it's nervous energy, right? But it's all about just trying to keep it at a good level without it getting out of control, Yeah. But how would you deal with it? Is it deep breathing, or is it self-talk, or how would you, if you were feeling nervous, what would you personally do?
I think recognizing it for what it is always step one. If you're going to overcome the nerves and power through and do the task that you are nervous about, the first step is not letting, it's always a surprise, right? Don't you think? As soon as you feel your heart beating and, oh man, really, I'm nervous about this. I've done this 100 times, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's kind of surprising. But I think, as soon as you recognize, okay, it's just nerves, then you've got the ability to get the job done. And so I haven't, honestly, in my life, I haven't thought about it much until recently, when I'm trying to consciously recognize it and use it as fuel, right? So it's a new perspective for me. So this is a good conversation, because I'm in the midst of trying to reframe this anyways. Well,
I think you can almost reframe everything. Anything, I should say. You can almost. I'm not going to say everything, but a lot of things. I did a podcast about table tennis. I don't remember the episode number, but if anyone's listening, my back catalogue isn't that big for Life and Life Only, so it was episode 20 something, I think. And I did a little thing about nerves, and I'll just give you very briefly 3 famous examples. So we had Jana Novotna, 1993 Wimbledon final. She was a very, very good tennis player through the 90s, but was prone to what they call choking, which is when your game seems to fall apart. And let's make it clear, and I'm sure you know this, at the highest level, the margins are tiny. You know, if you were off your game, you could lose pretty easily. I'm not going to say 6-love, but if you want to, for the listeners, if you want to watch this back, it's a little bit painful. You can find it on YouTube. It's Jana Novotna versus Steffi Graf, 1993. It's pretty rough. It just falls apart. Not every shot, but she starts hitting these wild serves. And the famous bit, which kind of endeared her to the hearts of everyone in Britain, was when she went up to collect her runners-up plate. It's literally a plate, isn't it, for Wimbledon, from the Duchess of something, one of the royals. And the Duchess obviously was saying nice stuff to her, and she just broke down and was weeping on her shoulder. And it's a lovely moment, actually. And it's made more lovely because 5 years later she won Wimbledon, and of course then the Duchess got to give her the cup. The other two, very briefly, Greg Norman, the US, I think it was the US Masters. He was something like 6-7 shots ahead, and he just fell apart. And again, he was fairly holding it together, because I think muscle memory will get you, repetition will get you so far. But he started hitting a few wild shots. And then Steve Davis, I don't know if you've even heard of him. If you know snooker in the 80s, you would know him. He famously said, I went up to hit this final shot. It was the final frame, the final black. It was about 12:30, midnight. And he said, when I went up to get it, I suddenly realised that my legs weren't my legs and my cue wasn't my cue. He suddenly everything just felt alien to him. And he was like, what do I do? I don't know how to do this. And there's a funny thing that's called expert amnesia. When you're an expert at something, when you've done something a million times, you forget how to do it, in the sense of if you had to explain what you're doing. As we were saying earlier with the tennis shots, oh, my arm goes up and then I do this and then I do that. When you get nervous, it's like a guy, I don't know if you had this, when you're 16, 17, and you go up to talk to a girl for the first time and you can't speak because even your grasp of the English language has disappeared, and you suddenly have to think, how do I make this word with my tongue?
When you bring up the Steve Davis thing, I remember listening to that when you were talking about it in the podcast you had about table tennis. It made me think, and it just jogged my memory, that I should look that up and watch it. I remember watching and seeing the Wimbledon one, and of course Greg Norman gets a lot of interplay on nerves, right?
Yes.
And not being able to perform. It's amazing, though, that it doesn't happen more often, or that it doesn't get publicized, I guess, as the same way as, these two, anyways, I don't know if Steve Davis before this, but the other two are famous examples, but it's got to happen on a day-to-day basis to these kids playing professional sports all over the world.
Yeah, you think so, wouldn't you? I think it's just, I think with the Steve Davis one, what happened was snooker final, the world final is the best of 35 frames, and it's over 4 sessions. It's very long. And what happened was he was actually 8-0 ahead. And then the guy who was playing, Dennis Taylor, pegged him back to 9-7 overnight. But I think the fact they got to 17 all, I think it took them both by surprise, because Steve Davis was so far clearly the best player in the world at that time.
Right.
So I think they just never envisaged it going to the wire like that. So I think Steve Davis had never had really a problem with nerves, but maybe he hadn't been in a close match for a long time. So I think it's a surprise element. But I think nowadays, all those examples are from the 80s and 90s. I think with the rise of sports psychology, I think more and more athletes probably train themselves, right, to try and anticipate it. It ties in perfectly with meditation because, deep breathing will help you a great deal. And like I said, self-talk, self-coaching, if you like. Scott, quick question for you. Can you, I've got on the doc here, can you make yourself believe you'll be successful? Do you think you can talk yourself into success, or is that too self-won, do you think?
I think you can do it, and I think people do it all the time. It's easy to use these sports analogies, but in everyday life, spending a lot of time out working about exercising your mind to control your thoughts, I think goes a long way to controlling your actions. I think we got into this a little bit when we were talking about thoughts and actions and in the book, right? It's all about non-judgment, right? And the more that you don't judge your shots as good or bad, the more good shots you end up hitting. The philosophy of it is pretty deep. We can think, or I'm going to think about it for hours, but as I try to apply it, I think it's true though, right? So if you believe it, if you stop applying the judgment, it will just start to happen, and then you will start to believe that you can be successful.
Yeah, I think maybe for some people, saying to themselves, oh, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, like 400 times, it might work for them, but I think I'm in the same camp as you, like the observation that something is there, that maybe it could be nerves as well, just accepting the reality of the situation. It's not the mantra,
right? The mantra is not what will get you there. It's you actually have to believe that you can do it. Then you can do it if you believe you can do it.
I guess so, but there is a school of thought. It used to be called fake it till you make it, but some people actually call it fake it till you become it. I think it just works differently for different people. I think, different strokes for different folks, really.
Because a good point about that saying, right? Because some people fail while they're faking it. And some people, faking it only goes so far. That is a piece of solid advice if you're, say, 2/3 of the way there, right? But I can't fake being a doctor, say. Couldn't, right? I'd kill someone. But too great, right?
Yeah, but those are concrete skills, I think, technical skills. I think maybe we're talking about faking confidence or assurance.
Okay.
Obviously, you can fake it in the sense that you can bluff. You can bluff other people, but I think you're right. You can't bluff yourself. I don't know. It's like the argument: can an introvert become an extrovert if they practice hard enough? I don't think they can, but I think they could get some of the way there. And I think a shy person, if they were courageous enough, I don't know, with practice. Yeah, I'm talking about maybe it could be 10 years.
Yeah. Introvert versus extrovert, I think, is a little bit more inherent, right? I think that'd be difficult to change. I don't want to say it couldn't be done, but it comes down to being introvert or extrovert. Do you get energy from other people or do you get energy from being alone, right?
Yeah,
it seems that there's a chemical side of it that is either true or false.
Yeah, because I think you're using there the correct. That's what introvert extrovert actually means. I was probably using it in the more popular sense. Let's say, let me just restate it then. Can a shy person become a comfortable person? And I think they probably could. It could take years, but
yeah, absolutely. You might even know people, right, that have done that in their own lives, right? I think all of us, to even some extent, have chosen to not let our shyness overtake us.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens, of course, when it could be with work. It could be that you are forced to start doing presentations, and obviously monetary motivations, not to become rich, but just to put food on the table. That could be an enormous motivation. You can do things that you never thought you could. The same as, if we go back to our bear in the woods thing, if you were being chased by a bear, you'd probably turn into Usain Bolt, if your life was at stake. So, I suppose we're saying then maybe you could fake it up to a point, but let's go back to tennis again. When there's a big tennis match, in England anyway, people get annoyed because the commentators constantly go on and on about the same stuff, and it sounds a bit like a cliche, like, do you believe you're going to win? But I actually think at the top level, I think it does almost just entirely come down to that, doesn't it? When you've got to serve out the match, in your head, you either believe you're going to do it or you believe you're not. And if you believe you are, then by rights, you should be able to serve it out because you've got the advantage of serving, right? Unless the other guy, pulls off some amazing returns.
Sure. If you don't believe you can do it at that point, at that level, you don't belong. If you don't believe it, you wouldn't. How could you have pulled the motivation to get to that level if you didn't believe you could do it? You have to believe you could do it.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I just forgot probably the greatest ever example of nerves. So do you follow golf? Do you remember Jean van der Velde?
No, I don't.
Oh, God. I won't talk about it now. I'll just ask... I'll just leave it there for people to look on YouTube. Jean van der Velde, 1999 British Open. I mean, it's painful, but it's kind of compelling at the same time. Especially as you know that he more or less got over it. Probably didn't actually, but he said he did.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, so if we go back to just quickly to the Wimbledon final last year, the way Alcaraz served that out, you can tell that he could deal with it because he hit 6 first serves in a row. And as we were saying earlier, the serve, that's the bit you have control over. And Djokovic hit some amazing returns as well. You really just saw both of them at their best, and it was fabulous,
He's something else, though, right? Alcaraz, physically has every skill that he needs. His short game or his drop shot usage is like almost revolutionary, right? But yet, 21 years old and doesn't seem to have any nerves at all.
Well, there was the cramps thing, wasn't there, at the French last year? I don't know what that was about. I don't know how much that was a physical thing and how much. Not sure, but yeah, he, like I said, that Wimbledon thing, and I don't know, I'm sure he does suffer from nerves, but I don't know, maybe being young, again, this is a difficult one because it might help you in a way, but then at the same time you could suddenly feel like a little boy, which obviously he didn't, but saying that could happen. Should we use that as a nice segue? We're just going to have a chat about tennis, so for the listeners, this would probably be a bit more for the tennis aficionados among you. You're going to enjoy this bit, I think. As we're sitting here, so we're at the end of February, we're in that lull period. We just had the Australian Open in January, and the next major will be the French in May. Just going to say off the bat, I don't follow the women's game as much as the men's. And one of the reasons, in fact, it's not a misogynist thing. There's a lady called Catherine on the tennis podcast, and she actually agrees with this. And she said because they only play 3 sets instead of 5, you often don't get the same journey, in air quotes. You don't get the same number of momentum switches, because in a men's game, you often have 2 to 3, maybe even more momentum switches. And it's really fascinating to see it play out. And, you do get some epic women's matches. I mean, sometimes they play 3.5 hours. But I just tend to follow the men's game more. How about you? Do you follow both?
Yeah, a little. My wife, Sarah, is into tennis in a big way as well. And so she obviously has interest in the women's game more than I would organically. So I do follow it, but I'm certainly no expert on either side, really. I know what I like. I've watched tennis for a long time, but there have been periods, I guess, where I've tuned out. Right in the years where Federer and Nadal were winning almost everything, it did get a little monotonous for a while, albeit the golden age.
Yeah, it's in a pretty healthy state, I think, at the moment. I still don't think there's going to be too many players winning the slams. Say in the next 5 years, that's 20 slams. I'm not sure it's going to be more than 4 or 5. Might get a couple of guys winning the odd slam, but I don't know.
Guys, and you think there'll be a short list, like the big 3 or the big 4 is going to get replaced with a new big 3 or 4 that will win everything?
Well, let's have a look. We've got the rankings up here, haven't we? So you've also got Djokovic. I think Djokovic will last. We'll do the slams thing, the game you wanted to do.
Yeah,
how many slams?
Yeah. How many more slams?
We'll do that. Do you want to do that now? Or?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we'll go in order then. So Djokovic, tricky. I'm going to say 2 or 3 more.
That's all, huh?
You think more?
I kind of do. He's only 36. Is this what we're looking at? How old was Federer in his last one? I think he was pushing 40, right?
Let's think. He was 1981. When they got to the 2019 finals, that was the one that went to 10 games all. It was absolutely epic. Yeah. Federer was nearly 38, so he was getting to finals at nearly 38. So
okay, let's give Novak 2 more years winning slams, and he could. Yeah, so I guess 1 a year would be your 2 that you just said, right?
Yeah, maybe, I'll say 3 then. Yeah. It's my final answer.
I'll agree with you on that.
Okay. All right. Number 2 is Alcaraz.
Yeah. Do you think he gets to 20?
Oh my God. I mean, he could still. The crazy thing is, this podcast could still be online 16 years from now, depending on what happens to the internet. Someone could be listening to this when Alcaraz is 36 or 37 and he's on whatever.
Yeah.
I won't get the answer to that for another 15 years probably, but I would say 15 perhaps.
Yeah, I feel like 15 is a given, right?
I think so, yeah.
A good over-under would be around the 20 mark. But it depends on what happens to the rest of the game, right? Who pushes him to make him better, but also who pushes him to steal slams from him as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, you think there could be a 12 or 14-year-old kid now.
Yeah, that we don't even know.
We've never heard of, who 5 years might be another Alcaraz, 10 years could be ruling the game. We just don't know, do we?
Well, the other part of it, too, is, after, Nadal is clearly on the backside of his career, although he probably has one left in him, maybe. But, Djokovic is a year or two away from being complete as well. And it seems like we've had these generational talents across all sports over and over and over again, right? Who is going to replace that? Will Alcaraz be that, in the GOAT conversation someday, the greatest of all time conversation someday, right? Do we need that so badly that it'll manifest just because the world needs it?
It could be, yeah. I mean, no one could have foreseen. Okay, we reached a point last year where it was 20 years since Federer's first Grand Slam, which was Wimbledon 2003. So let's say that we were talking last summer. If we went back from there 20 years, no one could have dreamed what would have happened. I'm sure we said this earlier, didn't we? Yeah. Sampras had 15, which is the record, and he had 8 Wimbledons, I think. Did he win 7 or 8?
Or he had 14, and Federer beat it with the 15 jacket. Remember the gold jacket?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So 14, yeah. And how many Wimbledons did Sampras win? It's either 7 or 8. It's 7, isn't it? Because he won 4 and then he won 3, I think. Because he's unlucky because he never did the 5 in the row. He did 4 and then 3.
Right.
Yeah, because he got beaten somewhere in the middle there. So I'm saying 15 for Alcaraz. What you give us a number?
I'm going 20.
You go 20? Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, looking at these rankings, I believe there's only 4 people. You've got the top 4 here, plus I don't know where Nadal is in the rankings. Andy Murray's somewhere in there. Yeah. I think they're the only ones who've won Grand Slams. It's the top 4 plus those 2.
Team won one too.
Dominic Thiem, he did. You're right. So you've got Yannick Sinner at number 3. Sinner has got all the makings because you can see that he's very calm.
Yeah.
And, this has been a theme of our conversation that we've had here. So there's no reason why he shouldn't win 10 or 15, except for these 12-year-olds that we've never heard of that are going to emerge.
Well, it's funny we're throwing around 10 slams, though, like nothing here.
I know, we are, yeah. Like it's just, 10 slams, yeah. Yeah, okay, I'm going to say 8 or 9.
Okay, on Sinner. Yeah, he's got a lot of time left, 22 years old.
Oh, God, yeah.
Could be a good number, right?
Doesn't seem to be prone to injuries. That's the one thing that worries me about Alcaraz. He's already had a few injuries. Not serious, but...
But, yeah, the cramping issue was a big deal a year ago, right? Or 2 years ago.
It was a French, wasn't it, last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, that worries me. Mentally, it doesn't worry me. Sinner, I think... Now, we get to Medvedev. Now... I've got this horrible feeling that, I think I may have said this to you already, that Medvedev is going to be the second best player at lots and lots of slams.
Yeah.
And he's going to be the bridesmaid. He's won one, hasn't he? He won the US Open to stop Djokovic from getting a Grand Slam.
Right. And was that the only one?
Yeah, it's the only one. He's been in 6 or 7 finals. I think he was a bit unlucky at the Australian. I think he was as good as Sinner, but... As we said earlier, in the end, he spent 24 hours on the court.
Yeah.
And it was just too much. I mean, you just can't. Sinner's too young and fit for you to overcome that. Medvedev, I'm going to say... Well, I think he'll win a few. I'm going to say 4. 4 more.
4 more, okay. Yeah. He's 28. He's not 22.
28.
I'd say 2. I think he's got 2 in him.
You think 2 more? Okay. Yeah, and then the rest of these guys, honestly, just looking through this list, Rublev is a master of the quarterfinal, but he hasn't got past it. Zverev, obviously.
I'd like to see Zverev kick into gear. I think he's a good talent that has had some, that big injury a couple years ago, sidelined him or took him out of rhythm for a little while, almost a year. But gold medalist, right, he has got it in him to beat everybody. So
yeah, but he's facing assault charges, isn't he? He might go to jail. We never know. Don't know, to be honest.
I didn't hear that. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's 2 women actually, but his ex-girlfriend has accused him of domestic abuse. So yeah, I think we'd have to know. Let's say that that doesn't curtail his career too much. And obviously, if he's guilty, then it should. But let's just say, for argument's sake, it doesn't. I think, 3 or 4 maybe. I think he'd be in the mix there. I mean, he's got all the attributes. I mean, he's so tall. His serving was insane in Australia.
Yeah. What do you think of Holger Rune?
Yeah, Holger Rune. I mean, he's only 20. There's a fantastic video of him and Alcaraz playing doubles together when they're about 14. Yeah. And I mean, they look about 10. He still looks young, doesn't he, Rune?
Oh, yeah. He's cut from the same cloth, though, right? He comes from the same schools, I think, right? Or they have known each other for a long, long time, right? I think he has the tools. What I wonder about his attitude sometimes. Does he have the right attitude for it?
Yeah, because he really should have been in the mix like the last year or so, and he's faded a bit. Do you want to just pick a few more out there from maybe the top 20?
Yeah. I like Alex de Minaur.
Yeah.
He's a lot of fun to watch. It'd be nice to see him. It's nice to see him crack the top 10 here. He had a great year last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's Australian, so naturally, I guess the Australian Open. I don't know what his best surface is, but I mean, he did quite well at the Aussie Open this year, so you'd have to think could be a contender for that. Then you've got a lot of guys. You know, Ruud has been a Grand Slam finalist. Tsitsipas was well in the mix, and they've gone off a boil a bit. Fritz, Dimitrov, Paul, Kachanov, Tiafoe, Shelton. So who would you say out of that lot would you see winning at least one major?
Because I live in North America, I get a little partial to the Americans, and the Canadian Felix is not up here anymore.
Yeah, and also, who's the other guy, the blondie who's mates with him? Shapovalov, yeah. A couple of years ago, he looked like he was knocking on the door.
They were, a perennial quarterfinalists, right? Shapovalov especially, right? But, so that's too bad. But, of this list here, of the 20, I mean, I'd love to see Ruud get over the hump. Tommy Paul seems like a cool guy to have a beer with, right? It'd be fun to see him win.
Ben Shelton.
Shelton, Tiafoe, any of them, I think, really. Hats off to Taylor Fritz for being in the top 10, etc. But it feels like I cheer for the other Americans more than Taylor Fritz. Just my personal view, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, he's a quite stylish guy. But again, I mean, I was a bit disturbed, because I think he's lost twice to... Did he lose to Djokovic at the Aussie? Can't remember. Maybe he did. Yeah, I think he did. He lost to Djokovic a couple of times and kind of said in his press conference that he almost didn't expect to win, which is a bit worrying. Don't really want to be hearing that.
Right.
For his sake, I mean, not for my sake. You had Chris Eubanks as well, who did well at Wimbledon. He's a commentator as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a cool guy as well. We'll come on to let's talk about the slams. So we're going to make some predictions for the 3 remaining slams this year. We'll go on the men's side and then we will talk about the women's side. So the big question, if Nadal gets back into some kind of shape, he's been away for a year or more, which is good and bad because you're going to be rusty, but you're also going to be rested. Could you see him winning the French if he's in decent shape?
I mean, you certainly can't count him out, but it feels so long ago that he was in good form, right? That I have a hard time seeing him back in good form. You know what I mean? He didn't play Australia. It's been a year, like you say. It would be incredibly surprising to have him show up at Roland Garros in tip-top shape.
Probably in his mind, if we're talking about reframing, he would reframe the rustiness as an incredible rest period. So he's going to come back. It's almost like that feeling, I don't know if you've ever had a bad flu or tonsillitis or something, and you've been laid out for about a week and you go out your house for the first time and you just feel completely spaced. I wonder if, he did play in Brisbane, didn't he, just before? He didn't play at the Aussie Open, obviously. If you can search back in the memory bank, I mean, the guy has just done it so many times.
Mentally, he can do it. I just have no clue where to put his physical ability right now.
Yeah. But the French is very interesting because obviously Djokovic is a good clay court player, not a specialist, but just a great clay court player. Alcaraz, I think, kind of grew up on the clay.
Yeah.
And then the guys like Ruud, I mean, he's fairly good on clay, and then Sinner is just a good player. Oh, so who are we tipping to win?
I'm going Alcaraz.
You're going Alcaraz. I'm going to go Djokovic because I think he needs to win as many as he can before he retires.
Yeah.
I'm going for a Djokovic-Alcaraz final. I think Sinner will be there and thereabouts, but I think Djokovic will bounce back. All right, Wimbledon. So Alcaraz won last year. That was surprising, wasn't it? I could see them in the final again. I'm kind of counting Sinner out here. I mean, Sinner's got plenty of time, but I wonder
though if Sinner's like, he's got his now, right? And so I think it's going to take him the rest of the year to kind of refocus, is my guess. I think he got it earlier than he may have expected, and now maybe he partied too hard, or not necessarily. I don't know that, obviously, but I feel like he's going to enjoy it and then reapply later.
So you think sometimes winning a Grand Slam isn't the best thing for the next 2 or 3 Grand Slams after that?
Unless you're a stone cold player, like, a seasoned Djokovic, right, who expects to challenge every single one of them, or Alcaraz, or that kind of, even Medvedev.
Yeah.
Are in that they've been there many times where this is his first final too, right? First final and him. So I feel like I don't expect him. Well, and besides which, the U.S. Open, I think he's better on hard court too, right? So that I think he'll finish the U.S. Open. I don't put him in the mix. He certainly will be in the mix, quarterfinal, semis maybe, but I don't see him contending.
I like the sound of that. Yeah, I'm going to tip him for the US Open. Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah. I like that. And then possibly the Olympics, of course. Oh, so I'm going... Yeah, I could see Djokovic winning the French and Wimbledon, in fact. I'm going to stick my neck out. I could be wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen. Or Djokovic and Alcaraz might share those two. But I can't go much beyond Sinner and Medvedev. Maybe Nadal, as you said, at the French. I mean, you can't discount his chances if he's walking on 2 legs, basically.
If he wins the French, if Nadal won the French, then you better look out at Wimbledon, right?
Yeah.
He'll be there contending as well, right?
Well, I mean, 2 years ago, it was astonishing. At the end of 2021, the big 3 were all on 20. And I remember someone on this podcast saying, in a funny way, wouldn't it be amazing if Djokovic and Nadal retired and they all ended up on 20, which obviously didn't happen. So they're level on 20, and then Nadal won the first 2 in 2022 and got to the semis of Wimbledon and had to pull out. He was due to play Kyrgios. So, he was not far from winning the first 3 slams, which is insane. I mean, obviously, it's not that insane because Djokovic has done it twice, or nearly done it twice. Djokovic was a few points away from doing the calendar slam last year. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So, US, are you going for Sinner?
Yeah, I'll give Sinner US.
Okay. So we're sort of sharing them out between those 3, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I'd like to see Medvedev win one. You never know. He could do. He could win the US quite easily.
One of these Americans could be the dark horse of the U.S. though too, right? The pressure is mounting, and they're climbing towards the top 10, etc. I feel like they'll put in some good shows. I'm not sure which one, to be honest. Probably Tiafoe, I think. But we'll see.
We'll move on to the women now. We've got the WTA rankings. Świątek is pretty not unbeatable, but difficult to beat on clay. But she's a strange number 1 because she's had a lot of these quite random losses that haven't happened recently on the men's side. 2 or 3 times she's just suddenly lost, almost out of nowhere when you're just expecting her. Because she's famous, she wins a lot of bagel sets. She'll win a lot of matches 6-love, 6-1, 6-love, 6-2, Did you catch much of Sabalenka at the Australian? Or?
Yeah, I did actually. We watched the final. And she's looking quite impressive, huh? After breaking through last year and now carrying forward again. I mean, good for her, right? She looks like she could be in control for at least one more slam this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say the same thing. Virtually every match she plays is on her racket, except perhaps against Świątek, because she can blast anyone off the court. But what Coco Gauff did was very interesting. If I could use a boxing analogy, it's kind of like if you had a guy who was a massive puncher and you did what Muhammad Ali once did to Foreman. You lay on the ropes and took their best punches and just let them burn themselves out. It's kind of what happened at the US Open last year. Goff, inspired by Brad Gilbert, who wrote a book called Win Ugly, she won ugly. She kept the ball on the court, and eventually Sabalenka just started missing. And I don't know if that was choking or not. Some say she's a bit mentally fragile in the pressure points. I'm not sure. A bit on the fence there.
Getting a win last year in the Australian Open, and then repeating again this year, speaks multitudes of, like, you'd have to have a really strong constitution to do that, period. So I know that was the knock on her previous, but she's clearly working it out.
Yeah. So I'm going to say Swiatek in the French. And then you got Goff again in America. I mean, they just absolutely adore her.
Yeah.
I'll go Sabalenka, Wimbledon, Goff, US. And then you got Rybakina. I don't know. Rybakina's a strange one. She won Wimbledon, but I don't know. She should be in the mix every single time.
The women's side, though, the winners don't always come from the top 5, though, right? They come from anywhere sometimes, right?
Yeah. I mean, Vondrousova, Ostapenko, who is always good value, often just for starting aggro, I enjoy. Yeah. I often secretly want her to start kicking off and starting aggro because she's an expert. She's playing very well. She won the French a few years ago. She's a Grand Slam winner. I'd like to see her get to the final at least. Vondrousova won Wimbledon last year. But, right. I mean, she fully deserved it, but it was almost by default because a lot of the top players went out. And unfortunately, I think Ons Jabeur does have a problem with finals.
Yes.
Because
I would love to see Ons Jabeur figure that out, though. She's putting in the work. She seems like she's got the talent. She could figure out the stuff, the inner game.
The inner game, yeah. Ons, you need to listen to this podcast.
That's right.
If any of her team are listening, yeah.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, so I'm going to be very unoriginal. So Swiatek for the French, Sabalenka for Wimbledon, Goff for US. How about you?
Swiatek, Iga for the French, I think is a no-brainer, right? I would like to see Ons in the Wimbledon final. So I'm going to pick her just to say, because. And then Coco Gauff, I get it. She's very good. She's getting it together, but I'm going to go Pegula for the U.S. Open.
Oh, interesting, yeah. She's always there, isn't she? She seems to be always ranked to the top 10.
Yeah.
She's 30. Yeah. I didn't realise Swiatek's only 22. Blimey.
Yeah, she's got some road in front of her, right?
Yeah. And Emma Raducanu for a dramatic comeback. I honestly can't see it, I'll be honest. I'd like to see it, but I think the US Open she won. She fully deserved it, but I don't know, it was so freaky, wasn't it, the way she didn't even drop a set. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
She went through 10 qualifying rounds. 10 matches, including the qualifying, didn't drop a set.
Amazing.
Yeah. And this has been epic, and I must say you've made a fantastic podcast debut. You're an absolute natural. This is the second day. We're just finishing it off. We recorded most of it yesterday.
Well, I hope I have things to say that people want to listen to or is worth listening to. But I have had fun doing it, so thank you for inviting me. I am a long-time listener, and I do listen to every Life and Life Only that comes out almost the minute it does come out. So it is a bit of a dream to be on. So I appreciate the opportunity. You're very welcome. Yeah, I think it's been great, and obviously the listeners are hearing the smoothly edited version, but I think it was a fairly smooth conversation anyway. But you're hearing all the good bits, folks, and I don't know how many parts. This could be part 3 you're listening to. It could be part 2. We'll see. But yeah, Daryl, good luck. Keep watching the tennis and keep playing the tennis. And who knows? We might have another one of these in the future. So all the best to you. Yeah, thank you, Antony. Very much appreciated. I had a great time. Thanks to the listeners for listening, as ever. And see you again soon. Goodbye.
I think the greatest surprise to me was the applications people made of the inner game without me even knowing it, without even being in touch with me. They'd read the book and they'd apply it to something important to them. I was greatly surprised when I heard that Pete Carroll, the head football coach for USC Trojans, was using it as his basic philosophy for coaching his team. And then he called me one day and said, yes, I've been doing this, and I'd like to check with you to see if it really is the inner game. And I was just delighted by the way he had taken those principles and applied them to football, which was very different than tennis or golf or music. Another surprise was a student of Isaac Perlman asked this great violinist what was the greatest book on violin ever written. And he thought for a while and said, that's a hard question. He said, I guess it would have to be The Inner Game of Tennis. And she was, of course, very shocked. But all this happening without me knowing it, I think the inner game is something people know a lot more than we talk about. It's just that the culture doesn't allow us to talk about our inner lives so much. And when it becomes a matter of conversation, we can learn from each other and proceed in it in a much more whole and healthy way.